everyone's talking about sauerkraut and all this other people's cultures. We do lacto, right? We had growing up, and that was in rotation in our house. And yet, at the time, I would be like, why are we eating this thing? You become more sophisticated, you leave the stuff behind.
Welcome back to Extraordinary Conversations with Ask Chennai, the podcast where we sit down with remarkable people and have the conversations that don't always make it to the polished bios or panel stages. We talk about the wins, the losses, the pivots, the power of owning your story. And today's guest, she's got a story that stops you in your tracks. Monica Shupikai Simmons is a Zimbabwean-born global investment banker, a mom of two, and now a book author. Her book, What's the Deal Africa, is a bold, empowering guide for African founders who are looking to raise capital and build global businesses. Monica has lived across Zimbabwe, the US, the UK. She has worked on Wall Street, and yet somehow she still finds the time and courage to tell the truth through her motherhood, through her legacy building. Monica, welcome to Extraordinary Conversations.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, Monica. We try to begin our podcasts at the fun end. We try to give people a sense of who you are as a person, right? And so we want you to imagine this. You're in a packed auditorium. There are thousands of people in the audience, and you have to get onto the stage. But before you get onto the stage, the lights come down, anticipation in the air. Your hype song plays. The hype song that introduces you to the world. What is your hype song, Monica, and why?
I wasn't expecting that, actually. This girl's on fire, to be honest. I think I'm just going through a phase in my life right now where I feel like I'm definitely on fire, and I'm a late start to this stuff, as in, slow burn. So I just feel like the last few years and the next few years are all about this girl is on fire. I'm living my purpose, and there's nothing better than waking up every day and understanding what your role is in the world, what you're supposed to be doing, what matters, and it's just going out there and making the most of it.
So, just to be clear, is it the one, the Alicia Keys, that Alicia Keys. Girl is on fire?
Yes. yes, that's the one.
And it suits you and it makes sense. I mean, looking at a book title like What's the Deal Africa, like this Girl's on Fire gives that. But if we're to drop all the LinkedIn bios that are polished and the perfect job titles and all of that, and I were to stop you in the street and say, who is Monica?
Oh gosh, I'm mom first, to be honest. I'm a child of God. I'm a daughter, sister. I really value my family relationships more than anything. I've just had a chance over the last few years to really think about what really matters to me and prioritize what's the most important thing. And a friend of mine always says that the kind of category is it's God, family, and work in that order. And I don't think I gave it any thought when I was growing up. But like I said, right now, I just feel there's a lot of purpose in what I'm doing. Spending time with my family is really the priority. I get work, I like my job, I'm good at my job, I can do all these things. But at the end of the day, I think if you're like on your deathbed and you're thinking about what really matters, I think it's family. It's your family and your relationships with your kids, your parents, siblings, all that kind of stuff. That's the stuff that really matters. And I'm very aware of that. Yeah.
I like that. A lot of people, we've had the who are you question quite a few times, but we don't quickly run to say I'm a mom first because we have all these other things that we want to mention. I like that you started with being a mom. And you grew up in Zim. What was that like?
Oh my gosh, I had the best upbringing. In fact, I tell everyone, even my kids, I feel so sorry for them that they don't have like this upbringing that I had. I grew up in Harare. We lived 5 minutes walk from Sam Levy's village. I went to the Dominican Convent High School. That's where my journey with God started, actually. So I'm a big believer in the school as a kind of a seeding, just the concepts of what morals and ethics are, which I use today, even in my work life, by the way. I come from a strong family. So my parents were very loving and attentive. Me and my siblings got along really well. So I had a really good, strong upbringing. And I don't think I had any like life stress until I was like like in my 20s because everything was just really smooth. At school, I was quite nerdy. I was one of 3 girls that did A-level physics at the Dominican convent. So I used to have to go to St. George's actually for my lessons. So I know the guys well, and I've always had a high comfort level with men. So me working in a male-dominated environment today is just nothing. I've been like that since I was 15, honestly. So I don't mind that as well. But I've always been quiet. I still am quiet. I'm more introverted than you think. But yeah, just excellent, solid foundation in Zimbabwe. And one of my jokes these days is I've got a cat. The kids and I have a Bengal cat, and we don't have a dog because I think it's cruel to have a dog in England that can't go out. You have to walk it. In Zimbabwe, our dogs were like running around. They had their own friends. They had their own thing going
Monica,
on.
I need to stop you. I need to stop you right there. So I always meet people and I say there are many cruel, very untrue stereotypes about African people. And I think I stole this from Trevor Noah. And I said, but the only thing I will say is true for every African, whether they come from the top of Africa to the very bottom, is that we all hate cats.
So I went through a divorce and my kids needed extra hugs. And so their counselor was like, you need to get them a pet. But then we started talking about this.
Rex or Bingo.
Shumba, don't even get me started. But here's the deal. I thought it was cruel to have a dog that would just sit in the house and wait for us all day. And then we'd take it for a walk around the block just for us. It felt cruel. So we started doing research, and Bengal cats are like dogs. So you know how cats are supposed to be like, they don't like people, but my cat's got a personality. My cat will come and sit on my lap to chat. It loves people. And my kids get all the hugs they need. So it's a win for us.
At some point, I'm going to ask you to bring the cat just so that I can scream at the screen.
He will probably come looking for me. He's called Ozzy, as in Oswald. Well, picture too.
Why is he called Oswald?
It's actually Oslo. My kids will kill me when they hear that. It's Oslo. So we couldn't agree names. And then at some point, we started talking about how some names were like destinations, like a place. And I don't know how, somebody said Oslo as in Norway. And we were like, yeah, Oslo. So he's Aussie. So yeah, but he's gorgeous. I'll send you a picture. If he doesn't come knocking, because he'll be looking for me, which again is very uncat-like to look for a person.
Monica, I need to talk about the fact that you are 100% through and through Zimbabwean woman who has a cat. Are you the only one? I would like my listeners to write in. We have a poll in every episode at the bottom. I honestly feel like this one is going to be, I have never, ever met a Zimbabwean woman who had a pet cat. Not, at least, if they had one, it would be like one in the garden who chases makonzo, who chases rats, but not one that you like stroke.
Yeah, but get this, I have always been an outlier, so I wouldn't be surprised if I was the only person. I'm not even kidding. I've always been an outlier, always. And just kind of to that point, actually, one of the things I also tell my kids is when you're young, it's uncomfortable being the outlier. And when you're old, that's your superpower. So I love that I'm very, very different. And yet when I was 15, I hated being very, very different. You know, all the girls sitting around, because I was like, oh, girls' school, right? Everybody sitting in the quad and like little groups and and I just felt like an outsider, you know? And now it's like, I am very comfortable being an outsider, and it actually pays to be different, to think different.
Monica, I think I read you wrote somewhere, it was a post about your relationship with your dad, and you said you'd always been a daddy's girl. I'm always interested in people's origin stories. You know, what were your parents like? How did that shape who you are today? Because you are obviously an individual. You're very successful. I was saying to my mom the other day, oftentimes you almost like cap out at the ambition that your parents had for you. What was your relationship with your parents like?
I'm grinning because I agree 1000%. And I actually think the reason why I do so well is because my parents just expected me to. I'm not even kidding. I remember, so my dad worked for a bank, for Zimbabwe Development Bank. So I'm not surprised I'm in finance. And I remember my dad was like general manager and wanted to be MD, chairman, whatever it was. And he got looked over and they brought in a guy from outside. And my dad was upset. Now, my dad was a chilled kind of guy, but I remember talking to him like over lunch, and so I would have been, what, 17 or something at that time? And he said to me, you know, the reason why he didn't land that role was because his background was not finance. So whilst he ended up in a bank, he wasn't like a finance person. And he said to me, finance is what rules the world. And Shupi, if you do finance, you could run this bank. And I remember clear as day being 17 and my dad telling me I could run Zimbabwe Development Bank. And that kernel tells me I can run anything. There's not, so whether I'm sitting in London, whether I'm in New York, whether I'm on Wall Street. You can't tell me what I can't do because my dad believed in me. And I remember my parents were big on family meetings, so we would discuss things at the table. So even when it was time for them to think about leaving the UK, we discussed it as a family. So my parents were listening to their teenage kids and going, do you think this makes sense? That idea of like we're all equals, there wasn't a hierarchy that was so strict. We could talk about things. I've carried that through my life. And so I'm able to have conversations of proper meaning with those that are in leadership because I don't view them as reverent. One thing I see with Zimbabwean youth actually is this idea of like, now, or we must, we must genuflect, when actually what they want is like dialogue. And there's no dialogue if you can't stand. You've got to be able to stand in your power to have that dialogue. And
We do have quite a dictatorial relationship between the young and the old in Zimbabwe, in a lot of families and a lot of the way that people interact. I don't know if it's in Zimbabwe only. Like, my daughter's quite young, and I want her to have, obviously be respectful and stuff, but to have a voice. I get annoyed when we get to a restaurant. She was sitting there with her little menu ready to order, and then the waitress kept on asking me, what does she want? And I said, she's sitting right there. Ask her. And then when the meal was finished, she came and she said to me, is she finished eating? I said, I don't know. She's sitting right there. Ask her yourself. And she's very articulate. She can speak for herself. She has opinions. She's an only child, so she can hold her own. One thing I've noticed among really, really affluent British people, when I go to their houses, is their kids are very, very good at interacting with adults. I went to a woman's house who was like very senior at McKinsey, and I was talking to her son. This kid was like 11 or 12. He walked up to my husband and he was like, hey, Aaron, so you're Canadian, right? And he was like, yeah. And then he was like, oh, yeah, my godfather is from Canada. And they had this whole conversation that was like the most normal conversation. And I guess I was like that as a kid as well. But I do think the ability to do that, it's something that I see imprinted on a lot of kids of a certain, unfortunately, kids of a certain class background that I think other people don't always put as much effort into, but it serves you well in life.
As I told you, I've always been a little different, but I'm big on boarding school because I think kids should know how to solve their own problems. And if you're at home, your parents solve your problems. And maybe not necessarily my generation, but today's generation, 1000%. People solve their kids' problems, everything. I was listening to a podcast the other day and they were talking about the value of something as small as your kid forgets to take their coat to school and it's a cold day, and how many parents jump in the car and take the coat. You're supposed to leave the coat at home. That child needs to understand the consequence of, oh, I forgot my coat. I have no coat. I got cold. I'm not going to forget my coat tomorrow. But the way we are today in parenting, we grab the coat, take the coat to school. So the kids never learn proper consequence. And I was like, absolutely. And that's why I really think boarding school is actually quite important. And maybe it's a bit extreme, especially in the culture that I live in here in England. But I do think independence is very, very important. And for as long as they just look to you to solve it, they're not going to be independent. They're just not.
Monica, you didn't even go to boarding school.
I didn't.
How can you feel so strongly about it when you are a product not...
I'm giving this a lot of thought. I've got some friends I've shared my thoughts with. I think I'm a little bit extra. But so in Zim, my parents didn't know where I was. They barely knew who my friends were. We caught up at a certain time of day. The rest of the time, I was wherever I wanted to be. There was a lot of independence in Zimbabwe. That's not what it's like in the UK or the US. We shuttled them from school home. We arranged play dates for them. We dropped them off. We solved everything is within this cocoon. And the first time they see real life is when they go to uni. And then they can't cope. And it's not that... At my daughter's school, the junior school that she was at before she went to boarding school, they were only in year 6 were they allowed to walk on their own to go to school. When I was in Zimbabwe, I was walking to school from grade 3.
Okay.
Grade 3.
Okay, I want to tell you a story. I went to Hellenic.
Yeah.
No one from Hellenic was allowed to walk home because when I was a small child, you know, Hellenic was on that Bardell Road. There was a child whose parents were late to pick him up and he left early and there was a tragic accident and he got hit by a car and he was paralyzed. People realized the consequences of that. So there was a rule, because it was such a busy road, you don't leave without an older person or a parent. So there's a lot of stuff people are always saying, and maybe you might say, oh, people from Hellenic, that school is soft, that's not realistic. Real schools in Zimbabwe, people walk themselves home. But I'm saying that people always act like there are no consequences, but there were consequences.
No, I understand completely. But think about it, independence would have been other ways. You go to your friend's house, right? So I'd come home and then I would leave my stuff at home and go hang out with my friend until dusk. The rule was be home at sundown. There were no phones. There was none of that stuff. That's the independence I'm talking about.
Teacher Island lane doesn't count.
Landline doesn't
No.
count.
My parents had no idea where I was. My parents would hear from their friends, oh, we're social at the side of the road, but Marlborough, I don't know, wherever. It was just very normal. I would be on my bike. And that's the level of independence I'm talking about. So what I'm trying to say is within the environment that I live in now, it's very hard to have that.
Yeah.
Very hard to have that. So unless your kid is naturally that. So my daughter is very independent and I love that for her. I always say, Maita, you're going to be just fine. Maita's great. She stands, My son, not so much. He's like what I was like when I was growing up. And my society, kind of the whole environment, helped me to step out and push me out. Whereas my son doesn't have that. So again, I'm always planning his like play dates and but it's all very controlled. And I know that he's the kind of personality who will really benefit from boarding school because mommy's not going to be there to solve things for him. And I think that's really important for him, to be honest. And I'm looking forward to that for him because then he has to get his own bag ready. And if he doesn't, there's a consequence to it. It's the key is that consequence of you forget it, you've lost your tie, you're going to be everyone's going to notice you've lost your tie. You need to figure out how to get the tie. Whereas right now, oh my God, you lost your tie? Click, click, delivered 2 days late. Like even I look for it. He doesn't have to look for it. I'm just going to solve it. So I believe in that. And I do know it's outside of norm because when I talk about it with my friends here, they don't necessarily think the same as well. It's more of a Monica thing.
It's very much the norm in our culture. So I think in every single episode, Vimbai, correct me if I'm wrong, but it feels like every single episode we've recorded so far, we've recorded quite a lot. Almost everybody talks about being young, going to boarding school in Zimbabwe because it's the thing that was done. And I went to boarding school when I was 12. I went to boarding school for high school. And I'm still quite traumatized by it. I was a bit of a weird kid. Sorry if anybody who's listening. I was a bit of a weird kid. People often ask me if I'm on the spectrum. Maybe I am. I was very sensitive. And the truth is, I struggled a lot. It was very traumatic for me being away from home. And it wasn't because I wasn't independent. I was an independent person. But it's just a lot, and especially teenage girls, they can be quite cliquey and they can be quite cruel. So when you're in a day school, to be spat out and rejected like that, you can kind of hack it, at least if you
Yes,
could go
you
home
can.
and cry into your pillow. But at boarding school, there's no escape. There's
No
absolutely
escape.
no escape.
Okay.
I used to write to my mom, bless her heart. I used to write to her and she didn't really write back. So once she came to pick me up for half term, I tried an experiment where I wrote to her every single day for 3 weeks to
Yes.
see when she would finally write back. Dear mom, I miss you. It is lonely. And I got into the car and I broke down crying. I said, I can't believe you didn't write back to me. And then she cried too because she felt so bad. She still talks about how she felt so guilty. She just had a lot going on. She was a woman also. I think she was juggling a lot of stuff. But I carried a lot of trauma from that. And I'm very, very close to my daughter. And to be honest, I want to see her every day. I just want to enjoy her. And not to say that I want to smother or prevent her from reaching independence, but
Yeah.
I don't know. But I think it's different for everybody because I also know people
That's
who
what I was gonna
loved
say.
boarding school, people who were like, it was the best time of my
Yeah.
life. In Zimbabwean culture, a lot of times they make girls do stupid work at home. So then it gave the girls freedom to just focus on schoolwork and other stuff.
So my mom was a boarder. So my sisters, my brother, everybody went to boarding school except me. I refused. I understand the point about it being personal. You said you hated it. Your daughter might like it, but she would tell you. That's what I'm trying to get at.
Hakuna kwanyenda. She's staying here with me.
And then
Yeah.
just to the parenting point, my mom, when my sisters went to boarding school, they went young. I think there was 7 or 8. So my mom was like, she went to pick them up every weekend. And the headmaster told her, please stop picking the kids up and taking them away on the weekend, because the weekend is when they bond with the other kids and you're removing that from them. So you're actually taking away an opportunity for them to get to know the other kids better. And so my instinct as well is to bring Maita home every weekend. My mom always reminds me, be child driven. Ask her, you want to come home this weekend? And sometimes yes, straight away. Sometimes no, there's stuff going on. And that's why I'm trying to just say that, we have our feelings about how we feel about it, just like my mom did, my sisters did. And, it's all very individualized to our personalities, but there's room to see what kind of child you have and what works best for them and where they will be okay and where they won't be. Because that kind of out of the different kid was me, but I was in day school, so I did go home every day. And I felt like I just had to be a certain way up until 1:30, then I can leave, I can exhale. That kind of feeling of then I can go home and I can exhale. And I was able to do that. And then I could be with my friends and people who are like me. And I was okay and I was relaxed. So if it was 24/7 of this feeling of I'm not like this girl, I think I would have had a very different experience
Because
of
your
school.
friends
So I
weren't your
understand.
people at school, basically.
No,
Okay.
no,
Your
no,
friends were always
no.
people
I had one.
outside school.
Yeah, I had one friend from school who's still my friend today. Still, everybody else, it wasn't anything else very different. So my daughter likes to be liked. I always say to her, I didn't need to be liked. So I don't want you to need to be liked. You should be very comfortable and say, hey, some people like me, don't like me. And I always say you only need one. I had one friend, I needed just the one. And I still don't resonate with conversations that most girls like. I don't care about social media stuff, entertainment stuff, hair stuff, nail stuff. I just don't, it doesn't resonate with me. And so sitting in those rooms and having those conversations just doesn't work, which by the way is why I failed at being an expat wife and which is why I'm divorced.
I loved books, and they were like where I found solace.
I was going to say, I feel so seen and heard right now, Monica. Thank you so much. Because I was that kid. I was always like the librarian was my friend. I knew her. She would give me books before they even labeled and put on the shelf. And it was mainly because we traveled a lot. And I got to a point where I was like, you know what? I'm okay with staying behind. Just put me in boarding school. So I actually asked to be put in boarding school. I was asking to be put in boarding school since like grade 7. But they finally did it when I was 16, 17. But I understand where you're coming from, where you say you would want to have your kids in boarding school. I would probably take my daughter to boarding school. She's independent, she's feisty. My son needs boarding school. I think it'll help him toughen up.
And that's it. My daughter wants it. My son needs it. That's the language.
Do you mostly
Now,
read business books, Monica?
I used to, oh God, I did this whole transition actually. There was a time I was interested in understanding humans, just as human beings. So there was a time I was more understanding kind of philosophy. What makes us who we are? Why do we make the decisions that we make? Who are we? That kind of stuff. And then now it's more like, in terms of business, what is it that makes some people successful, not so successful? And then what is it that made them go through that phase? But I like the idea of like a process. Because one of the things I think we always do is we pin things. We pin when someone's at a high, or we pin when they're low. But I just think life is long. So this whole idea of and then you get to the end of it, and what have you learned, and what have you done, and that's what I really care about. So right now I'm kind of reading autobiographies, to be honest. Like, just what's your story and how did you get there?
Whose are you reading?
Right now I'm not reading anything, but
What are
that's...
some really good autobiographies you've read? Your favorites?
Do you guys know Queen Noor from Jordan? She married the King of Jordan, and I loved her story. Now, I've read Clinton, Obama, I read the men as well, but I like the women's stories. She grew up in like a Western kind of culture and got married into this Eastern kind of culture because of her love for the King of Jordan at the time. She wasn't even wife like number one. I think she was like one of the wives. But the point was just that this evolution she had to go through to accept, understand, think about impact, think about the world, and the world being her world, the country of Jordan, and the positive impact she could have on that. I just think that is just an incredible story of like human beings and how we are able to think differently. I'll give you an example. I listened to a podcast just yesterday, and they were talking about medicines and how if you're in the UK, US, Canada, Australia, all you know is powder stuff, right? So paracetamol, you get sick, you take a powder. And the rest of the world actually has some combination of herbs and food plus. So tonics. If I talk to my mom about, I'm feeling whatever, she'll laugh and say when she was growing up, she had a headache or stomachache, her dad would tell her to go chew off a piece of ginger. And just so in just one generation, my mom has got, what she thought was normal and what I think are normal are two totally different things. And now it's like we're relearning the things that were normal. And it's because there's an understanding that things have to work together rather than just be one. And so this narrative of I know everything because I'm Western, and then actually maybe I don't, I should learn some things that are Eastern or African or whatever, because actually they all work together. I had a conversation when I was doing my MBA. We had tours. We went to visit India and we went to visit China. And on paper, they looked very similar, right? Billion population, growth stats, the number of people being converted from poverty into the middle class, all these stats that looked so similar on paper. When we landed and we saw each of the countries, it was like incredibly different, including kind of their democratic system, right? Their politics. One's democratic system in China is not. And we had conversations around whether that had an impact on how they were doing well and succeeding. And when you're sitting in the UK or sitting in the US, all these Western places, we are so ingrained in what we think is the right way to do something. We forget that there are literal civilizations that are thriving today that have nothing to do with the way we do it. We all go, Dubai is amazing. Dubai does not have a democracy. And Dubai does not have elections. Dubai does not. China does not. And yet, if you go tomorrow and you go to China, you go, wow. And if you go to Dubai tomorrow, you go, wow. You go to Qatar. And it's this idea that we need to be more open and less sure that what we're doing is right. And I like that in everything. So that's in the way we educate our kids. My son was writing pen, doing his letters at age 7. My friends in Amsterdam are like, oh my God, our kids don't even do ABCs until they're 7 years old. And yet the stats on how educated people are in Scandinavia are like incredible. They don't go to school and proper sit down and start writing until they're a certain age. They just have the equivalent of like going to forest school. They go out and play and learn through play until they're a certain age. And yet we are sure you have to have nursery and you need to start learning your ABCs. And it's not, these things are not fixed, none of it. So whether it's education or health or government or whatever, I just think we need to be a little less sure of what we're doing and more open to other ways, because there are other ways.
There are totally other ways. It's quite interesting. I think the outcomes of education in the UK are quite good. And also don't forget that the reason we are happy to send our kids to school young is because it's a form of childcare, which enables women to get back to work. But you touched on something earlier. So at the beginning of my career, I studied chemistry. My background, before I was a founder and real estate tech investor, I was actually a research scientist. That's why I was a research scientist until I was 30. And what I would be doing if I wasn't doing this today would have been drug discovery, process chemistry, etc. And what's interesting is a lot of the drugs that pharmaceutical companies in the West use are discovered. There are whole programs to go out and discover what the active ingredient and things that are in the wild is, so they're discovered in nature. So there's a tree in South Africa that people say if they chew it, they lose their headache. But what's interesting is a lot of times if you go and analyze the active ingredient, you find out that it's just the tree that produces aspirin. But naturally in the wild, it's not that different. When I was a teenager, I used to get really bad period cramps. My grandmother used to give me honey, like uchi, on the thing. For some reason it helped. I don't know what the active ingredient is, but the scientific mind in me thinks, well, maybe if you looked at it, it could be something new. It could be something similar, but just occurring in the wild. But funny thing, I read a book about, and I think it was a book called Caste. Very, very depressing book about, the caste system in the US. But it talks about how there was a guy, he was a slave who was brought to America, and he was from West Africa, and he basically explained to the slave master what was, for all intents and purposes, vaccination. He said, what we do in my village is if somebody gets something like this, we cut everybody a little bit, we give them a little bit of the disease, and then it protects everybody else, then nobody else gets it. And we do that with everybody in the village, and that's how we protect each other. And there are cases where sometimes the slaves brought something to the West, taught the Western person that, whether it was a slave master or something, but they were never able to attribute the knowledge to the slave because no one would take you seriously if they knew where it was coming from. So they took the credit for themselves. So again, some of the things that you might see that are like globally recognized knowledge or something like that, it's again not always at odds with what is done. It's just maybe where it's attributed or the way it's described or it's done differently. So even vaccination was being done in West Africa before everybody else was doing it.
Yeah, I remember when I had my daughter and the rage was skin to skin contact. The rage, just the closer, all this stuff. And I was like, child cries, put the child on your back, child feels your heartbeat synchronized. That baby's asleep in no time. And this is something that I saw every day, didn't even question, didn't even think about it. We don't, right? And that's why I'm like, these things that we We don't know why. We just do. Kale, black-eyed pea, Nemo. Things I was like, I grew up with, had every day, didn't even question. I get to the US before someone tells me, oh my God, it's a superfood. The value of fermented food. Everyone's talking about sauerkrauts and all this other people's cultures. We do lacto, right? We had growing up. And that was in rotation in our house. And yet, at the time, I would be like, why are we eating this thing? Like, I thought it was something that you kind of transcend. You become more sophisticated, you leave the stuff behind. When the essence of what your body needs actually has always been there, and we've always done it. We just thought it was what poor people in Africa did, when actually it was what the body needed. And whether you're living in England or whether you're living in Zimbabwe or you're living wherever, it's still what the body needs. And so I'm just finding it fascinating at this stage of my life that a lot of the things that I thought I was learning in a certain way, it's actually a lot of back to basics.
A lot of learning.
A lot of it.
And it's so my mom had chemotherapy a couple of years ago. And on the first day when we went in, the doctor, we were so scared because you don't really know what to expect, right? When we got there, the doctor, it was nice because we were in Zim. So it wasn't the doctor, it was the nurse. He was like a sprightly young man. And he was giving us a list of, this is what you should eat. And it was really cool because we were in Zim. So it was like food that you recognize. And then he actually said, and also, you're here, you decided to do chemo. He said chemotherapy in the Mshonga boy. If you decide to go down the Mshonga boy route, you do that. Or if you decide to go down the chemo route, you do that. But don't mix it together because as usual, in the You're listening to Extraordinary Conversations with Ask Chennai. But have you actually asked Chennai yet? Are you drowning in admin? Are you juggling a packed calendar, relentless responsibilities, and a million things on your to-do list that never seem to get ticked off? At Ask Chennai, we understand that your time isn't just valuable, it's irreplaceable. That's why we match busy people with smart, reliable virtual assistants, all based in Harare, Zimbabwe, who can take life admin off your plate. Think you can't afford to hire help? Think again. Our packages start at just £159 per month.
So my mom says I'm an old soul. Because one thing that I find fascinating is I look at my daughter and I go, oh my God, I'm going to see her grow into this woman. It's going to be crazy. So I said to my mom, wait a minute. Do you remember what I was like when I was 3, 5, 7? So how different am I? She goes, you were always an old soul. And I think I believe that. Because even like milestones, like age milestones, I've never been phased.
30 is the first time I freaked out. I was legit having panic attacks anytime somebody said the number 30. You could be saying $30 and my heart, oh my gosh. I was not, because I had a list. Monica had a list. I had things I was supposed to have accomplished by 30 and I get to 30, I'm like, but what happened?
That's hilarious. So remember, I'm always the opposite. So I remember getting to 30 and going, oh, everyone's getting married. Should I be thinking about getting married? Maybe I should think about getting married. So even my husband, I met him when I was 35. Met him because I think I was 31. So not 30, 31 when I thought, okay, so maybe it's not just gonna kind of happen. I actually need to make a decision to get married. Like I thought, oh, I'm gonna have to decide to do this thing. Like, and the guy I was dating was traumatized because obviously I just turned our whatever situationship into like, hey, we should get married. Like I want to get married. So obviously that did not work out. And I actually have no hard feelings because I changed the rules right halfway through the game. That's not right. And so after that, everyone I met, I was like, I want to get married. So if you want to just date, I'm not the girl, right? But I was older, much, much, much older. And then, but I attribute some of that to why my marriage didn't work, because then I was very sure I just wanted to get married and have kids. So I was on a mission to get married and have kids. So I would ask, I want to get married and have kids. I didn't think about what would it be like as like I didn't. I just wanted to get married and have kids. Then I took the box, married and had a kid. And then when we were together, now we are having these serious discussions, and it's like, oh no, we're not the same. Our value sets were completely off. But it's because I was dating to get married and have kids. I wasn't dating to get to know someone like that. So I like I said, all my stuff is all messed up. It's not standard.
Like I just had the biggest light bulb moment. I didn't realize until you said this. My goal was also to have kids. Because my point was, I'm going to have all my kids before I'm 30, and I don't care how it's happening. I'm having kids before I'm 30. So the rest of the stuff that happens now that you're saying it, I'm like, oh my gosh, okay.
Yeah. 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 And I remember I had a chat with my mom and I was like, Mom, because my marriage was not good. I mean, it was by far, and I don't mean a little, I mean by far the worst relationship I ever had. It was because all the fundamentals were off. And that's what was so sad about it. So I like to date for 5 years, 7 years, because that's my personality. I'm chilled. I want to get to know you. My life is not one of these, let's just run. I'm not like that. I'm just like uber chill. And so until I said, oh, snap, if I want to get married and have kids, I'm going to have to make this happen. Right. And suddenly I want to get married and have kids. So I got married and had kids. And then you get married and have kids, and then you go, okay, the person that I'm with, because now you're married, right? And now I was realizing, oh no, we don't have the same value set. We were so misaligned. And that's why I'm saying the relationship was not good. Whereas the relationships I had before were good, but I wasn't ready to get married. I wasn't talking about getting married. I was just cruising. And that's the kind of irony of it, I guess, because now I wanted this thing and I was so focused on the thing. I wasn't thinking about him and I, how closely aligned we are, how similar we are, what we care about. Do we have the same value set? And the things that really mattered to me didn't really matter to him the same. They just didn't. And so that became very clear. And that's why it didn't work out. Yeah, it was something I realized when I was in it. And I said to my mom, why didn't you tell me that marriage could be so hard? Because I'd never had a bad relationship. She's like, you grew up in a house where people were happy and stuff. You think you'd learn what happy is. But I realized my problem was that I thought all relationships, if you pick the right person, are going to be easy and good, because I grew up in a household that had easy and good. And my relationships to then had been easy and good. I just assumed my marriage would be easy and good. So I wasn't framing my thoughts around what a marriage is supposed to be like. Yeah.
But no, you both touched on something that I think is true for a lot of women. And whether it's Zimbabwean women, I see it a lot, but women from abroad. There are women who, when you get to a certain stage in your life, you just really want to be a mom. You want to have kids. And so sometimes you're like, I've seen this for a lot of people, to be honest, where they're like, this dude, and not sure, but I think I kind of want to have a kid. So let me just have the kid, and then he can always go, but at least I have my kid. And I've actually been the one to give people advice, like, why don't you just have a kid? You can go to Monaco, just have a kid. Doesn't matter. Like, at least then you have your kid. And then, because there's this window of opportunity also where when you're around a certain age, you kind of want to bang it out. Otherwise, it might become too late.
So because I'm religious, I really thought I had to be married to have a kid. I wanted my children to be in this union as part of this kind of biblical thing. I have cousins where I go, you should just go and have a kid. And I understand, but that's not my biblical teaching. But I totally think they should, because if they don't, the window's closed. You should be able to do what you want in that sense. But it is not straight line. And I won't pretend that it is. And so, especially like right now, if I think about the challenges of having an ex-husband as opposed to someone who just has a kid on their own, it's very different. And half the time I do go, oh my God, I wish I'd just done this myself. I could have just had these kids myself, right? Because it's just easier. But I thought I was doing the right thing. I believe that was the right thing to do. It was just wrong for me. And even talking to you now, I don't know what the right answer is. But I do know that there are people who have their kids on their own who are happier than me, because I have to deal with an ex. And it's complicated. And if you said, remember I said you're going through a divorce, it's the worst. It's not like a breakup at all.
How is it different from having a breakup? And I asked this just I've never gotten divorced. I've had breakups where I felt like my heart was going to break into a million pieces, but I know nothing. And my mom got divorced, and my parents had like a long, messy, horrible divorce. But like, how would you say it's like primarily different though? Is it because the entangling of the families, or?
It's multi-layer. So what tends to happen is, all the emotional breakup, relationship breakup, you have that whilst you're still married. By the time you're leaving, you're past the emotional stuff, because you don't get divorced and then have an emotional break. You have the emotional break when you're in it. So the strength to say I'm leaving is post-emotional break. So whether it was a violent relationship or somebody was cheating or whatever it was, all of that's already happened when you're in the marriage. So you're breaking up in the marriage. And then at some point you go, do you know what? I'm just doing this on my own, right? So you're past the emotional, can we still work it out? Usually not, because unlike the US and movies where it's like, oh, you cheated on me, I'm going to get a divorce tomorrow. Divorces don't work that way. It's such a process that you don't start it unless you're done, done. I was separated for years before I got divorced. So the emotional stuff was done. the mechanics of divorce are just brutal. That's what's so sad. So you've got families that are intertwined, and then it's unraveling that in some way. The finances, oh my God, it's just terrible. The kids, it's just terrible, because then you start thinking about third parties. So whether your ex is seeing someone or you're seeing someone, and the kids, what does that mean? It's so messy. I've got friends who, when they got married, tables, dad and dad's new family, mom's over here with her family, and it is so messy. It is incredibly messy. So I always say, do not take it lightly. The stuff I'm describing is the stuff that you, if you know what I mean. The stuff you don't see is like you're kind of doing everything on your own when you're the mom anyway. And someone said to me, motherhood is certain. You know, it's your kid. Fatherhood is faith. That's where there's all this whole thing about DNA tests and all this stuff, right? When it comes to child responsibility, motherhood is certain and fatherhood is faith. So if they can, when it's convenient, when it's whatever, then they can financially contribute, physically contribute, emotionally contribute. It's a choice for them. When you're the mom, there is no choice. It is 1000% guaranteed that you are the emotional, financial, and all that stuff. That's what you provide. There's no fairness. Whereas if you were a single girl and you got there and you go get your own kid, and you know, it's your kid, it's your rules, it's what you want when you want it. It's simpler. But again, because I'm Christian, I don't know if that's right. I just know it's simpler, and people do it and they do it well. And I don't know what's the difference between me raising my kids and then having to deal with this guy. And
I feel like in our culture as Zimbabweans, there are a lot of situations where you just think, especially growing up, like, why don't they just get divorced? Like, why? I do feel like there's some people who I have seen growing up just dragging out a situation that just felt like surely your life would be so much more abundant. Do you think that coming from our culture, divorce is also made so much more complicated because of the way that we are?
yes, so that's part of why I was separated for years and years and years. So I'm Christian and I don't believe in divorce. I don't like it. I knew the marriage was over. We're living in different countries. I knew he was seeing people. Some of my family even thought I was crazy. What's wrong with you? But I kept thinking, what's the difference? And the reason why we actually started divorce proceedings was because he met someone and he wanted to marry her. So because he wanted to marry her, he had to be legally not married to me. So we started, but that's the process. So when I first left, it was like, okay, you know, we're going to do this divorce thing. And then it was like, oh, you know what? Because we were living apart, everything was already separate. You just tick on. I wasn't looking to have a relationship. I was full on my kids, my work, my parents, family. I didn't have bandwidth to have a date. And some people are different. That was just me, right? For me, it was not, I can't even say it wasn't a priority. I had zero interest, like negative interest in having any kind of relationship. So it's not like I thought, oh, I had to be divorced to have a relationship. It just wasn't on the plan. I was so focused on trying to figure out this, like living alone and raising my kids and being close to my parents and how am I going to make this work because I'm in a high pressure job, you know, all these things. Whereas for him, it was like he was free now, right? So he was out there alone. He didn't have wife, kids, meeting people.
Living his best life out in the streets.
And so I understand where the Zim women are coming from because I'm a Zim woman and I was doing it because I was like, well, you know, why? Like, what would be different? Nothing in my day-to-day life. What would be different? So it just didn't really happen. And so it is interesting because I'm an independent woman, blah, blah, blah. You think I'll be tomorrow to the courts and, you know, all this stuff. I was like, I don't care. I really don't care. But then you start thinking, now what? I had this 1 year, and maybe we'll just kind of lead into that. But I had this 1 year where that was the year that I was getting divorced, and I was diagnosed with cancer that year. It really felt like it was a year of out with the old and in with the new. It really felt like that. And so all the things that I thought, oh, you know, it doesn't really matter. Does it, you know, all the stuff, it really crystallized what does matter. And that's why I'm like crystal clear on what purpose, you know, and what's important. And all of that was not important. So in some weird way, I was still dragging, that relationship was a drag on me. Maybe I should put it that way. So my marriage was a drag on me because it was in this purgatory, right? So we are definitely separated. We're definitely going to get divorced at some point. It just hadn't happened. So a lot of things just kind of happened. And obviously, I wasn't taking care of myself, right? And then I got the cancer diagnosis, and it was like, oh, I have to actually take care of myself. You know, we talk about foods. It's like, shoot, I didn't care about anything. Like, it was just, I was just living life. So it was just a wake up call on so many aspects of my life and a resetting in so many ways.
But it sounds like then you had a period of like full transformation. They say God sends you the same lesson, or the universe, depending on what you believe. God sends you the same lesson over and over again until you get it. And I'm not saying that things are a lesson or anything, but you were in a period of intense transformation where something outside of yourself forced you to change your whole life. What was that period like?
It was incredible, and it was not scary. I have to say that. I always feel I have to say that at the top, because people assume that when you get a cancer diagnosis, you're scared, you're living in fear. I was not scared. I had the most incredible year. I couldn't work for a year. So I was just with my thoughts and with my family and with my oncologist and with my divorce lawyer. So for a year, it was crazy. But I wasn't, I mean, I'm not trying to say it was easy. I just mean I didn't have many pity parties. I had way fewer pity parties than you think. I'm actually serious. You could count them on one hand, if even. In fact, the hardest emotional time for me was after I was given the all clear, after I was in remission. And they actually say that it's almost like you power up for a race. You know how athletes run, they get through the finish line and then they collapse. That was me. So I was good, be given the all clear, no more cancer afterwards. Oh my God. Then I was a wreck. And that happens a lot. If you speak to people who've had cancer, that happens a lot.
What do you mean? As in that you have your game face on, you're ready for the fight, and then when you're told you've won, you kind of just like, now what?
All she's gone, the adrenaline's gone. So whilst I was in it, and I remember, I'll never forget this, because in the UK, they give you a choice. They ask you, do you want to have treatment, or, what do you want to do? And that is correct. They won't let you mix. So you got to pick what you want to do. And I was like, yeah, I want to do chemo, right? I'll do chemo. So I picked chemo. And so I knew it was going to be very hard on my body. But I'm religious, so my relationship with God got so strong. And I remember I got to a point, and I don't mean months later, I'm talking weeks in. I got to a point where I was like, if I die, it's okay. I've done what I was supposed to. And if I don't die, then there's more I'm supposed to do. But in any case, it's okay. My biggest fear, like the thing that made me cry, was my son was 6 at the time. And I remember thinking, I was Googling all this stuff. And if you're 6, you may not remember everything. So he will have flashes of me, but not necessarily remember everything. And so I remember thinking, oh my God, my son may not remember everything. That was, if anything, that was the hardest part for my brain to kind of embrace. Everything else I was okay with. And because I'm a big picture thinker like that in many ways, I was comfortable with, like, maybe my role was to have these kids, if you know what I mean. Like, that was my role. So I've delivered on the purpose. And so everything else is like extra. So a little extra year, extra 5 years, extra 10 years, but I was supposed to be here for these kids. So when I would pray, I would always say, like, whatever it is, I'm okay with it. I'll just do the best I can. And so I was very chilled. And I remember people meeting me and going, are you sure you're okay? You seem okay. And I was like, yeah, I'm fine. And I was like this. I was fine. I really felt okay. And my oncologist, I remember him saying to me that the issue with cancer is it's not a bug, right? It's not like some bug came into you and bug makes you sick and we take the bug out or we cut it out and you're good. Cancer is your body. Your body did this. You create cancer cells yourself. So there's something about your environment that your body doesn't like. It could be food. It could be emotional, it could be spiritual, it could be any aspect of whatever it is that makes you you, that is out of whack, that is causing this to happen. And that's why people who are diagnosed with cancer go through these life changes. People quit their jobs, they get divorced, they go to Bali for a year, they climb mountains and stuff. It's because you know that you as a person, your entire being is not okay, and you got to change your entire being. You can't go and be the same person you were before. It is not possible. Because you know that didn't work. So I made some big changes in my life. I don't drink. I used to drink before. Absolutely. Don't drink at all. I care about food. If I could, I'd be vegetarian. In fact, when I was having my chemo, they told me to stop eating meat because I needed iron. And they wouldn't let me take iron supplements. They don't want you to take anything that might interfere with the chemo. So I had to eat meat. So even now, I eat meat, chicken, blah, 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 but I could be vegetarian. The days I just vegetarian straight. I really like plants. I believe in plants. Spirituality, I was always a believer, but the levels now are just completely different. I trust God with everything.
What does your spirituality look like? On the first episode of our podcast, I mentioned casually, I said I go to church 4 times a week. And then all these people who know me, who are very close to me, were calling me like, She's like, why are you lying to the people on the podcast? And then my husband was like, people are going to think you joined a cult. Why are you saying that? And I was like, but I do go to church 4 times a week. And then he's like, yeah, I guess you do, but you're making yourself out. It makes you seem like you're something that you're not. And the truth is, because I think maybe I am very, very spiritual, I struggle with identifying as a Christian exactly, because I believe a lot of things. I go to a Catholic church and I go to a Christian church, but then sometimes if I say I'm a Christian, then I have to get into long debates with other Christians about whether my beliefs are truly Christian. So I do attend Christian churches. It's a big part of my life, and it became much more intense again when I went through a period of strain and a period of transformation. But it's a big part of my identity. But it confuses people because I'm also Chennai, and I have all these other identities that are like, how do those things all sit together? And I'm like, they just do.
So my whole life, I've had Christianity in my whole life. So my grandfather was an Anglican priest. It wasn't like a thing we did. It's just who we are, right? So even like when I say my job, my family, we are helpers. We help. I think that's who we are. So I grew up going to church, and I was always very religious. And I remember always just feeling connected to God, always. The first time I felt like something happened in my life that I was like, God did that for me, was when I went to university, because I wanted to go to the University of Cape Town, and my parents couldn't afford to send me there. And I remember praying for that, not because I got a scholarship to go to the US, which is a whole other story, by the way. I joke with my daughter that I should, because I got a scholarship to go to Spelman. And at the time, I didn't know what Spelman was, to do actuarial science. And I did not know what that was. So I remember my parents and I chatting. I was 17, right? But we talked as a family. Our family decision was I was too young to go. And I was okay with that, by the way. I was like, yeah, you know what? I'm not sure about this US thing. I had to go look up where's Atlanta on a map. I didn't know, right? But anyway, so I choose to do finance instead at UCT. And I knew I wanted to do this thing. And my parents could only afford a certain amount because the 4 of us, myself, my brother, and my twin sisters, the 4 of us were born within 3 years. My parents are crazy. They had 4 kids in 3 years. So we were all at uni at the same time. It means we're very, very close. And it means we all had fantastic experiences together growing up. It also means school fees were hectic for my parents because then they were doing 4 university fees at the same time. So my parents were like, we can't do this and do Australia and do England and do, it was just a lot. So I remember praying and saying, God, I really want this. And through a path I could connect and see, I went and spoke to someone at church who told me to go speak to this guy. And this guy from church ended up being the managing partner at PwC, and PwC gave me a scholarship. And for me, that was a direct path from me talking to God, me speaking to my pastor, and me getting the scholarship. It's the first time I thought, oh, this God thing is not like a nice woolly thing. It's actually actionable. So I've always been religious, always. When I was living in the US, I was living my best life out there, partying my head off and all that good stuff. I definitely was not all God. I used to go to church on Sundays still. So I lived near a church. I used to go to Catholic church every Sunday. I was in the choir. I was still all those things, but I was not like personal relationship every day. I got back to personal relationship every day when my marriage started to fail, because I was trying to figure out what to do. And when you've got so many options, it becomes important to pick the right thing, you know? And I was looking for guidance or some kind of wisdom, and I knew it was beyond me. So I would pray, show me the right path, that kind of thing. And I'm not surprised that I am where I am because this is the right path, right? So when I got sick, it wasn't like, oh, I'm going to start looking for God now. God was already there. And so it was just, okay, so this has happened. How am I supposed to handle this? What do I need to do? So that's why I said I was so calm. I was not frazzled at all. I was like, this is how it's supposed to be. And trust me, it got very bad. I had blisters. It was very, very tough for me and my family, my kids. That's why I told you we got the cat, because my kids, just divorced, mommy sick. Everybody was stressed, so we got a cat so the kids could get extra hugs.
Now I feel bad for making fun of you for getting a cat.
The point is, I just got closer and closer, and it's not weekly, it's every day. I listen to podcasts every day, and I don't mean one. I'm talking multiples. My go-to music is Christian music. I blaze it in my car when I'm with my kids. We get to play whatever they like. On Sunday, 1000% Christian music only. They even know the songs. We sing it, blah, 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 all that stuff. And it's really important that I see that to my kids as well. It's like a legacy that I grew up with, and I want them to have it too. And mainly because life is hard. And sometimes you need to know that you don't have to have all the answers. it's okay to say, I don't know all the answers, but you want to have comfort in thinking wherever it lands, it'll be okay. And I think I get that comfort because I believe in something else, a higher power, and that's God. And some people meditate, some people have their religions, and all power to them. But for me, it is 1000% God. 1000%. Yeah.
And that brings us to the end of part one of our conversation with Monica Shupikai Simmons, a truly extraordinary woman with such a rich story. We unpacked her upbringing, values, and lessons that have shaped her journey. Join us next week for part two, where we dive into her book, What's the Deal Africa, and talk about how she's helping founders across the continent raise capital, plus her unexpected guide to surviving the zombie apocalypse. You don't want to miss it.
We are available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and all the places where you watch your podcasts. If you like this episode, share it with your friends. Share it with anybody you know who loves podcasts. And we cannot wait to see you again next week on this Extraordinary Conversations with Ask Chennai. You're listening to Extraordinary Conversations with Ask Chennai. But have you actually asked Chennai yet? Are you drowning in admin? Think you can't afford to hire help? Think again. At Ask Chennai, we match busy people with smart, reliable virtual assistants, all based in Harare, Zimbabwe. And our packages start at just £159 per month. I'm Chennai, and I built this business because I was tired of wasting money on flaky freelancers. I needed support I could actually trust. So I went back to my roots and tapped into one of the most talented workforces on the planet. Our team are not your ordinary virtual assistants. They're extraordinary for extraordinary executives. Stop drowning in your to-dos. Start focusing on what really matters. Whether you're a founder, freelancer, or time-starved exec, Ask Chennai is your unfair advantage. Visit Ask to find out more. Let's help you get your time back.